In the vast stretches of the universe where humanity had settled on countless planets, there was one tale that echoed through the galaxies, a tale of a woman who had lived for centuries, and whose eyes were said to hold the mysteries of the cosmos itself. Her name was Elysia, but beyond that, very little was known. She lived in isolation on a remote, forgotten planet, far from the hustle and bustle of human colonies. The legends surrounding her were as old as the stars, whispered in dark corners of bars and around campfires by travelers and explorers. But there was one constant in every story. No one dared remove her blindfold. For 200 years, the blindfold remained untouched, and it became a symbol of power, mystery, and fear. The reason for this fear was not the blindfold itself, but what it hid. The people who knew Elysia's name, even in passing, spoke of a woman who was different from anyone they had ever encountered. Her calm demeanor and ageless appearance were enough to stir awe and confusion, but more than that, her eyes were said to hold the answers to questions humanity had not dared ask, answers that could change the course of history. Some said the blindfold was a gift from ancient beings. Others claimed it was a curse. What was certain, however, was that no one ever tried to take it off. The myth of the woman with the blindfold was as sacred as it was terrifying. Enter Caleb Vale, a former soldier, now turned explorer. After witnessing the destruction of his home planet in an unforeseen war, Caleb had become a wanderer in the stars. He had no family left, no reason to stay on any one world for long. The battlefields of his past had left deep scars both on his body and in his heart. The destruction he had witnessed had robbed him of his faith in humanity. But deep down, Caleb still longed for purpose. That's when the rumors of Elysia reached him. Unlike most who would dismiss such stories, Caleb had always been drawn to the unknown. The idea of a woman who could see the very heart of the universe, who had lived for centuries, piqued his curiosity like nothing else. He knew the risks. There were plenty of explorers who had gone searching for Elysia, only to disappear without a trace. But Caleb was different. He wasn't afraid of the mysteries of the universe. He was driven by the need to understand. The journey to find her was long and difficult. Caleb traveled through harsh terrains, crossed vast deserts of barren planets, and navigated through abandoned space stations that had long since been forgotten. It took months before he finally reached the remote colony where Elysia was said to reside. When Caleb arrived, the settlement was small, barely a handful of families and a few traders. It was a place untouched by the grand politics of the universe, where the past still seemed alive. The inhabitants had heard the stories, but most had forgotten or simply didn't care. Elysia, however, was a different matter. She was a figure of legend, living alone in a grand ancient mansion that looked as if it had once been the home of royalty. The mansion was a quiet place, filled with relics and forgotten artifacts from a time long past. Caleb found his way there, driven by a quiet determination. The locals gave him wary looks as he passed, but no one stopped him. They too knew the story, but no one dared approach the mansion. Elysia's home stood at the edge of a forest, its stone walls covered in ivy and moss. The air around it was still, as though time itself had stopped. Caleb approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing through the silent night. The door to the mansion was heavy, made of dark wood, and when he knocked, it creaked open as though it had been waiting for him. Inside, the air smelled of old books and incense. It was dimly lit by candles that flickered softly in the corners of the room. And then he saw her. Elysia was seated by a window, gazing out into the dark sky as if she were looking at something only she could see. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, and her robes, though simple, were made of a material that shimmered in the low light. There was an otherworldly aura around her, and despite the centuries she had lived, she seemed ageless. Her face was calm, serene, yet there was a hint of sadness in her eyes that Caleb could not see. When she turned to face him, there was no shock, no surprise. It was as though she had been expecting him. "Caleb Vale," she said, her voice a soft melody that seemed to carry the weight of the ages. "I have been waiting for you." Caleb froze. He had heard stories of her foresight, of how she could sense the intentions of anyone who came near, but hearing her say his name sent a chill down his spine. "How did you know who I was?" he asked, though he knew the answer before she spoke. Elysia seemed to know everything. "I know much," she replied, her eyes never leaving his face. "I know why you came." You seek answers just like the many who came before you, but they were not ready. You, however, are different. There was a long pause as Caleb tried to find the right words. The room felt heavy with the weight of her gaze, but he couldn't bring himself to look away. I've heard the stories, Caleb said finally. I've heard about your blindfold. People say it's a symbol of something powerful. What's underneath it? What do you see? Alicia's lips curved into a faint smile and she stood up slowly, her movements fluid and graceful. The blindfold is not a symbol, she said. It is a necessity. For 200 years I have worn it, not because I wanted to, but because the world was not ready for what I carry. What I see. Caleb's heart began to race. He had heard of the blindfold, of course. Everyone had. It was said to be an ancient artifact, passed down through generations, capable of sealing away whatever power lay behind it. But it was more than that, he now realized. There was something about Alicia, something in the way she spoke, that made him feel like he had just unlocked the first layer of a much deeper mystery. Are you going to take it off? Caleb asked, almost unable to contain his curiosity. Alicia's smile widened, though it was bittersweet. In time, perhaps, she said, but not now. The truth you seek is dangerous, and you must be prepared for what happens when the blindfold is removed. Caleb felt a shiver run down his spine. What could possibly be so dangerous about removing a blindfold? He had to know. He had to see what lay hidden. But Alicia held up a hand as though sensing his thoughts. The journey ahead will not be easy, Caleb. There are forces beyond your comprehension that will awaken if the blindfold is removed. You must decide if you are truly ready to face them. The room seemed to grow colder. Caleb, despite his growing sense of dread, nodded. He had come this far. He couldn't turn back now. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady. Alicia paused, her gaze lingering on him for a moment. Then, with a quiet sigh, she stood and walked over to him. Gently, she placed her hand on his shoulder, her fingers light as a whisper. Very well, she said softly. Then you must be the one who removes it. As Caleb's fingers reached for the blindfold, the weight of history seemed to press down on him. Little did he know that this moment would change everything. Not just for him, but for the entire galaxy. The moment Caleb's fingers brushed the edge of the blindfold, a cold shiver ran through him as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The room seemed to grow still, as if time had frozen for an instant. Alicia stood perfectly still, her gaze unwavering, as though she was watching him from some place far beyond this world. With a deep breath, Caleb gently lifted the blindfold. It came away easily, but the moment it was removed, everything changed. The air thickened, the room seemed to darken, and the temperature dropped. Caleb's heart raced and his hand trembled slightly as he gazed at Alicia's eyes. But what he saw, he couldn't explain. Her eyes were not like any human eyes he had ever seen. Instead of pupils and irises, her eyes were swirling masses of stars and galaxies. It was as though the very fabric of the cosmos itself was contained within them. Infinite clusters of glowing stars swirled around a center that seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. At first, Caleb thought he was seeing an illusion, a trick of the light. But the more he stared, the more it became clear. What lay before him was real. The eyes that had been hidden for 2 centuries were not just eyes at all. They were a window into the universe. It was as if the universe itself had opened up before him. Stars, nebulae, planets, each one more beautiful than the last, shifted and moved within the depths of Alicia's eyes. Caleb felt as if he were falling into an abyss, pulled into the swirling galaxies. He could feel the weight of time and space pressing down on him, a dizzying sensation that made his stomach lurch. Is this real? Caleb whispered, his voice hoarse, barely above a breath. He couldn't tear his eyes away. The beauty and the vastness of what he saw overwhelmed him. But beneath that beauty there was a deep, foreboding darkness. A feeling that something was waiting, something ancient and powerful. Alicia's voice broke through his trance. You see it now, she said, her voice soft but filled with an eerie authority. The eye you have uncovered is not merely an organ. It is a portal, an eye that sees beyond the physical world into the very heart of the cosmos. It holds the secrets of the universe, the beginning, the end, and everything in between. Caleb swallowed hard, trying to process what he was witnessing. But how? How is this possible? How can you contain all of this? Alicia lowered her gaze, her face somber. I do not contain it, she explained. I am merely a vessel. My family has carried this power for generations, guarding the eye and keeping it sealed. For 200 years I wore the blindfold to keep it from being unleashed. The universe is vast, but it is also fragile. My eye is a gift and a curse. It holds the potential to create or to destroy. Caleb's thoughts raced. He understood now why no one dared remove the blindfold. This was not just a simple eye, it was the key to unimaginable power. And now he was the one who had removed it. The universe has been watching. Elysia continued, her voice growing darker. And now that the blindfold is gone, there will be consequences. The forces that have slumbered for millennia are stirring. They have been waiting for this moment, Caleb, and they will not wait much longer. Caleb took a step back, his heart pounding. What forces? What do you mean? Elysia closed her eyes, a deep sadness settling over her. An ancient entity, and being older than time itself, lies dormant within the fabric of reality. It is the force of chaos, the embodiment of destruction. When the blindfold is removed, it will sense the change and begin to awaken. Suddenly the room seemed to tremble. The air was heavy, thick with a presence that Caleb couldn't explain. His instinct screamed at him to run, but he stood frozen, his eyes still locked on Elysia's. You mean, this thing is going to come after us? Caleb asked, his voice barely a whisper. What can we do? Elysia's expression grew grim. We must stop it before it fully awakens. Once it does, it will be too powerful to control. Only one person can prevent it. The one who has unlocked the eye. That is you, Caleb? His heart sank. He had only come here for answers, for something to give his life meaning, and now he was faced with a task that seemed impossible. To prevent the end of the universe? How could he do that? Why me? He asked, his voice trembling. Why is it me? Elysia's gaze softened and she stepped closer to him. Because you are the one who removed the blindfold, she said simply. You are the one who has the power to wield the eye, but you must learn how to control it. If you don't, it will consume you. Caleb closed his eyes, trying to gather his thoughts. His entire world had just shifted in an instant. The weight of what he was being asked to do seemed impossible. How could he possibly harness the power of the universe itself? Elysia placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, she said. I will help you as much as I can. But you must act quickly. The entity is already beginning to stir. As if on cue, a low rumble echoed through the ground. Caleb felt the vibrations beneath his feet, and the sky outside darkened. He looked out the window to see that the stars were starting to flicker and shift, as if they were being pulled in by some unseen force. His heart raced. We don't have much time, Elysia said, urgency creeping into her voice. We must go to the Temple of the Cosmos. There is a place there, deep within the temple, where you can learn to control the eye's power. If we don't make it there in time, everything will be lost. The urgency in her voice snapped Caleb back to reality. He nodded, despite the fear building in his chest. How do we get there? Elysia stood tall, her hand still resting on his shoulder. I will guide you, but you must be ready. The journey will be perilous, and you will face challenges that will test everything you have. Caleb glanced once more at the swirling galaxies in Elysia's eyes, then looked back at her. Her calm strength gave him a sliver of hope, a glimpse of the resolve he would need to face whatever was coming. All right, he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. Let's go. We don't have any time to waste. Elysia nodded, and without another word, she turned and led Caleb out of the mansion. The once quiet planet was now filled with an oppressive energy, a feeling of something ancient awakening. As they moved swiftly through the darkened streets, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that the universe itself was watching them, waiting for what would come next. The Temple of the Cosmos was located in the heart of a vast mountain range, hidden deep within the wilderness. It was said to be as old as time itself, a place of immense power where the secrets of the universe were kept. Elysia had never taken anyone there before, and Caleb knew that this journey would be one like no other. As they set out toward the temple, Caleb felt a deep sense of responsibility settle within him. He was no longer just an explorer, no longer a man haunted by the past. He was the one who held the universe's future in his hands, and with that thought, the weight of his task became clear.